Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining Leading with Light. Today, we want to look at a topic, survival, remorse in leadership. We're, talk- we're talking today about when leadership feels heavy. I want to thank all of you who are joining on YouTube and those who are joining on LinkedIn. We are going to be moving into our thing, and we want to be thanking those who are joining. Franklin Simone, I see you. And so I want to say welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Dr. Marcia Thomas. I'm a Christian leadership consultant and an empowerment executive coach trainer and a best-selling author. And I also help persons who are completing their doctoral or master's dissertation to successfully get to the end of that. And so today I am looking at a topic that is very, very dear to my heart. Thank you for joining, Marco. It's the first time I'm having you, and thank you so much for joining, Dr. Leslie. Always supporting me. I appreciate you so much. And this topic is very dear to my heart, and it is called Survivor's Remorse in Leadership because it is becoming for me uh, a very pertinent topic. And as we go through, you will discover why. And so because so many persons, leaders, friends, colleagues in Jamaica and also across the world is going through a tough season, a very rough time, burnout, job loss, and they're also looking at changing their pivoting and looking at ministry shift and even emotional exhaustion. A lot of persons are mentally stressed at this time. And so many persons look around sometimes and feel that they have survived it. And there's this guilt there instead of there are these dual emotions, grief and gratitude, you know? So this topic for me didn't just come from a book. It's not theory for me. It came from my own quiet moment with God during this week when I look at the many persons, principals, teachers, my colleagues, my friends who have lost everything and will have to start over. And I get a little disturbed when I hear that they are to those who can go back to school were to reopen in Jamaica. And so I don't think the technocrats and those persons understand clearly what it means when persons suffer great loss, is grieving, the time that they need to recover, to make sense of where they are, to begin the process of healing. I think a lot of technocrats miss that because sometimes they come through very safe and sound, and that gives them, they lack empathy. And sometimes it's not empathy that they lack, it's the understanding that the recovery has to start from within. And so I want to remind people that there is a season when everything around people are changing. I know I had that season when everything around me was changing. People were burning out, my family members were dying, persons were giving up and walking away from their purpose. And I was standing as a leader in my organization, still under that stress and so on. And person thought that I had it all together. I was doing so well. And then I kept asking, why me? Lord, why am I having so many of these issues? Why is everything compounding itself? And why are you keeping me very strong and resilient despite it all? And he made it clear to me, I am keeping you for someone else. It's not just for you, it's for someone else. Apart from giving me glory, it's also for someone else. It's for you. I have prepared you. I am making you survive for someone else. And when you have survived and you're moving into this survival and you're taking it one step at a time, and when you move forward, it moves into a stream where you now understand that you are feeling a little guilty or feeling asking why is a human question, and it is not easy when you are the only one standing or doing well or surviving in a space where other persons have suffered loss and grief. And so remorse, leadership survival remorse is very, very real, especially in the context of when we have to lay off people. It's a very heavy burden that we carry. And so because you are grateful that you are still up and running, and you are feeling a little guilty because others aren't. And so I want to look at this topic this morning because it's very important. Thanks for joining, Lisa. Thanks for joining, Fred. I see you over here. Thank you so much for joining. Yes. Very, very important. Very important. Thank you so much. I want you to know I appreciate you all for joining. All right. So I usually do a slide for those who have requested it so they are able to look at it in the replay and they're able to get some nourishment and benefits. And so I want to always start with a statement that I want you to think about. You made it through the storm, but part of you still feels guilty for surviving it, especially if your neighbors didn't, if your friends didn't, if your colleagues didn't. You feel so guilty for surviving it. That's human. That's very human. And so sometimes after the storm, you wonder if it is okay to be grateful and to celebrate. You might have outlasted a tough season in leadership and organizational change, a huge trauma or crisis in your organization, ministry, or your business, and others did not. Just as the case with many persons in Jamaica at this time, I moved away with minor damages, and some of my colleagues, there is an individual who came out of his house. There was nothing missing from his house, nothing shift, nothing. And when he looked around him, he collapsed because he recognized that everybody else around him had suffered immense loss. Maybe you're striving, but you're carrying the quiet questions. Why me? Why did I survive? Why me? What is the reason? What is the purpose? Thank you for joining, Simone. All right. So let's look at today. I want to talk about what survival remorse looks like for faith-based leaders. And I want to say or guide or from my experience, how to honor your journey without guilt and comparison. And I want you to understand how grace helps you move from remorse to renewed purpose. And I also want and value your comments and your addition to the conversation and any question that you may have. If I can answer, I will try. Why is survival remorse relevant right now for us? Statistics about survival remorse, or commonly known as survival guilt, in leadership and the workplace shows it as a more common than we think, an impactful phenomenon after layoffs or organizational downsizing. And I felt that it was a real timely topic for this week because of the turmoil caused from these displacements internationally. In a 2025 Career Minds report, 61% of companies reported conducting layoffs in the last 2 years, with 52% expecting further layoffs within 24 months. And so that's very important. That is why I think it's very timely. How are you, Charita? Thanks for joining. It's also in that same report that there are a substantial portion of employees and leaders who experience, after a layoff, they experience depressive and anxiety symptoms. And these symptoms, these depressive and anxiety symptoms, are reported by roughly 30 to 50% of survivors. And this makes survival guilt a relevant ongoing issue. It happens when persons are in a plane crash also, especially if they are the only survivors. They wonder if it was worth it or all, and so on. And they wonder why. And so leaders have the same issue. So what is survival remorse in leadership? So we can understand it. It is usually called survival guilt or layoff survivor syndrome in leadership. And so the emotional distress or guilt experienced by leaders and employees who remain in an organization after significant layoffs or restructuring or a traumatic change is what accounts for what we are now calling survival remorse. Now, it's very important that we understand what it looks like in leadership, especially for faith-based leaders. So leaders and employees may feel empathy and solidarity for those who lost their jobs. And this can become bothersome depending on the organization that you're in and who believes that business must go on as usual. And persons are to maneuver their hurts or this change and adjustment very quickly. And this can become problematic for persons who lose people that are extremely close to them. And also, if it is a case where persons who are left behind are not as equipped as those who have been displaced. And I find that one of the trends in the organizations now is that they are to keep those who will cost them less, who they will pay less, and also those who they can train and mold into who they want them to be. And we are finding that this in itself does not build an organization. And so leaders who are faith-based leaders who find themselves in that position and who are lucky to survive may question why they were kept while others were terminated. And they now have a moral conflict because they know that the persons who have been displaced are the persons they leaned on, the persons who would mentor them, and the persons who are actually needed for the organization. And they carry this guilt of undeserved privilege. And they sometimes, persons who leave organizations or are displaced or laid off, say that they did so much, they gave so much, and no one from the organization reached out to them. And oftentimes it is because of this guilt that they are feeling, or the remorse, if it is not organizationally mandated, because sometimes organizations mandate that you are not to have any contact with those who left the organization, which I do not necessarily support, because the practical side of leadership, the revelation side of leadership, makes you understand that you need basic information from those who are going out, especially if it is IT or it is coming from a health point of view where you need the background and so on. And the files in themselves does not tell you the emotional state of people and so on. They are just things that may be recorded in a docket, physical and emotional and so on, but you may need to get some clarity. It is the same for caregivers and so on. So there are some organizations that require you to really have some basic contact or connection with the persons leaving the position so that the smooth transition can be navigated properly. Now, there's also, survival remorse also looks like this for faith-based leaders, where the increased workload and stress from absorbing the workload or responsibilities of the departed co-workers reinforce the guilt, because they have to use their equipment, they have to look at some of the notes, they have to look at the work that they did before, and sometimes the comparison is made, and very vindictively, that they weren't doing much or weren't doing anything, which is really erroneous. It's just to get the mindset to change, and we have to be very careful about that. There's also The complex blend of spiritual, emotional, and leadership challenges that a faith-based leader will feel, and leader with moral conscience and leaders who are ethical. So they might wrestle with the questions about the why, being looking at the divine purpose. They might be wrestling with the justice and might feel spiritual dissonance because they now have to act and have to make a choice between what is right against what is popular, or what is their Christian duty, the moral responsibility, and the expectations as a faith-based person. And sometimes they being unable to do that because of the red tapes and so on, and unable to walk away at the moment, they feel like imposters. So they also add to that spiritual dissonance, imposter syndrome, feeling that they're not deserving and that they are not being their true self or authentic self, and that they cannot morally argue for certain things and so on. And that can throw them off very badly. And so they begin to question their core values, their role in the decision that was made, their role in the outcome, sorry, and that also can make them feel guilty or remorseful, along with feeling helpless. And then I heard recently, and I want to look at that much later, Dr. Lazy, maybe we could fish it out, where they are now saying that helplessness is a choice. Don't know how much I agree. I want to think about it a little more. Helplessness is a choice. All right. We also want to look at how they reconcile. There's an issue now also with how they reconcile their faith with the emotional burden or survival guilt that they are carrying. How does it look in the sight of God? Am I doing justice? Am I in my innermost soul? Am I true and honest? Can I be bought or sold? Do I need to revise the way I look at things? Do I need to make a shift? Do I need to exit myself? What is it that I can compromise? And what is it that is my non-negotiable? So those questions become rooted very deep in their psychic, and they begin to ask those questions. Thanks for joining, Sean. I see you. And then it might pull them into a deeper call to ministry with deeper empathy. And so those who are left behind, they become soldiers of those and warriors for those people, and become their voice and begin to advocate very seriously for their safety and well-being. They also may find that they feel this need to be very transparent about their struggles, so that persons can actually see them authentically leading, and persons who are humans with emotions, who understand what they are going through, and who may not be able to change it overnight, but gradually make strides to change the status quo, and to make sure that persons' overall well-being is protected, and that the clarity is there for them. And so that is part of the issue for some of these organizations. So it's not as easy as some persons would want it to be. Really not that easy to deal with. But we have to look at what it means for me, and how is it that what am I sensing as an individual, as a leader, and how are persons managing these displacements and so on, and why and what we need to do to make those changes. The persons also, or yeah, I'm fledging it out, Dr. Leslie. Perhaps helplessness can be a choice, very much so. Learned helplessness. However, the helplessness that there are different levels, and so we would maybe want to flesh that out. The ones that occur by default or automatic is also there too. I agree, totally agree. All right. The faith-based leader will also increase effort in prayer, community support, and advocacy, as I said before, simply because that's where their source of strength, clarity comes from. That's where their wisdom comes from, their discernment, because that is how they transition, navigate, and embrace their faith through prayer and supplication, and the fact that prayer moves mountain. If you lack wisdom, you ask from God. And also, change can only come, some changes, through Christ itself. And so there are chains that can be broken through Christ itself. So those who lean heavily on God and on faith and on those types of changes will have increased effort in prayer, and they will add fasting and those things to break what they call heavy chains. And that's a fact also when it relates to leadership remorse, because if we are to go into the details of it will be that it would take a much longer session. So I want to touch those, but individuals who really feel that they would want to talk about this some more, who feel that they are suffering or having that type of anxiety, and they are torn between emotions of gratitude and grief, and who feel guilty because they might have replaced someone who they knew very well and also understand the suffering, I am able to give you the free sessions. I'm offering free sessions to individuals who are Jamaican nationals who are navigating the crisis in Jamaica at this time, who are leaders and who needs to get that little break to pull this train across, to get some clarity, to get some faith upgrade, and to get some confidence. I recently, and I am posting that today, met a colleague. It's a former colleague, and she have not had any great backlash from Hurricane Melissa, but she found herself in the supermarket trying to get stuff and stuff for her teachers, and she used the very same words. I don't know. There's just this feeling that I'm wondering why me. The grief that I'm feeling, the struggle I'm having right now, because so many of them have lost their belongings. They have to be starting over, and here am I. Nothing has happened to me. I am expected to bring them back into the school system very quickly. Some of them don't even know where their next meal is gonna come from. And I just don't know why I'm the one who survived and why it's so challenging. I just don't know what to do. And I was honored to be able to pull her through the remorse and to make her come with sit down and make plans with what she has in her hand, what she's able to do, and what she would need help to do. And sometimes it's not that they don't know, it's just that it's so overwhelming. So I just pulled out of her what was there already. I looked into the environment, I became an accountable partner, and I became a support, and I became a mentor, because the fact of the matter is, it's hard to read the label inside of the bottle. And there are some of us who kid ourselves because we are nice in a nice little bubble, and we don't have anything that really tests us to see what we can produce. Life has been good to us, and instead of being emphatic and being a support for people, we become very condescending, and we feel that they must do much better and they are to move much faster and they must overcome. And we tell them things like, you just have to focus, you just have to be wanted bad enough, and so on. And sometimes persons don't have the strength to lift themselves, but once we lift them up, they find the strength to move forward. And that's why coaching is so important to me and so personal, because I really value and see it an honor to have persons become masters of their own destiny and to change lives and change outcomes together with people achieving. It's very, very important, because sometimes we actually miss those things. All right. Some of the symptoms of survival remorse is that persons become very absent from the work, especially if they occupy a desk that is belonging to someone that was close enough to them, that were their mentor or were persons that they had a bond with. And sometimes too, there is decreased production or productivity in an organization because persons have to absorb additional responsibilities, and their role has to be, they are not able to adjust to their role as much as they want to. And then there, of course, there is anxiety, and there's the fear of being left behind. There is a fear and the uncertainty of not knowing when it will be their turn. And there is also the fear of having to pivot before they are ready. And those fears are really, really real. And they actually can create havoc in the person's mental psychic, in the emotions, and also in how they operate, the decision making, delay, the procrastination. All of those things can be as a result of this. And so they might become very indecisive persons who are very confident and straightforward, now double guess, second guess themselves and wonder, because of the environment that has become so unsafe mentally for them, toxic, and psychologically, it has pushed them over the edge a little. So they are no longer feeling complete and feeling that they are supported or they are valued. And so we want to look at it like that. And then there is the financial instability that lurks in their presence and also in the organization. Because if there is decreased productivity, if there is anxiety, if there is fear, if there is indecision, if persons are taking their leaves now and not giving it back to the organization, so every leave that is out there, they make sure they take it. Because some persons are loyal to the organization when they are treated well. They will do their overtime and they will push forward. But there are many who will not. When this happens, when persons begin to be laid off, and when persons are losing their income and so on, there are many persons who will not give back to this organization also. So those things can create problems. The guilt can make them not perform at their A game, and it can also make them wonder when it will be their turn. All right, so when we are looking at that program, Shauna, thank you for your comment. When we are looking at the helplessness, which was just a side issue that was brought up by someone, we will look at the different frames of it. So we were looking that we could talk about it. And so one of the days, Dr. Leslie and myself and you will be looking at the different levels of helplessness, those that are learned, those that are automatic, those that are actually rigged, and those that are happen by default, and so on. So thank you so much. And so at that time, we will ask the question, what helplessness protects you from? Because today we're talking about survival remorse, which is something that a lot of persons need for moving forward from what has happened to them and how they are feeling. All right. I want to introduce what I call my wisdom package. It's a wisdom framework for me, and it is really 3 lessons that I want us to take for healing survival remorse in companies. And we have heard that it is 61% of persons who are actually talking about feeling that way, and that the 30 to 50% of those who answered from the 61% are expressing feelings of depression and anxiety when there is a displacement in their organization, which results in layoffs or persons changing positions and absorbing responsibilities and so on. And there is also, as I spoke about it also, the remorse that comes from you getting ahead and persons not making it out, you surviving. Some of who you have mentored And so we talk about having a real rough season, going through that rough season. And when you look around, it's a number of you that's going through the season. You made it out and they were not able to. And you feel this obligation that you should be helping them. You ask yourself why, you wonder what the purpose is, and you now feel this quiet sense of guilt. It happens to much more persons than we know. It happens to leaders. And there are some persons who move along, but there are some who are torn between grateful and grief. Grief for those who are there leaving behind, grief for those who are not making it out, grief for those who are struggling because of the displacement, grief for those who, you know, were not justly removed. And there was recently a situation with a gentleman who worked in an organization for 20 years. His mother got Alzheimer's. He did his job very well, and he started using up his leaves. He exhausted them, and then he was an only child. His mother was having difficulty with the caregivers, so every time he had to be absent. And there was no one in his organization who actually recognized that this is a man who has been doing his job for 20 years. He was always present, was always capable, has expertise, used it well, and just going through a rough time, a dry season, and the organization was not empathic or gracious enough to say, let's see how we can assist you. And persons in the organization grieve when they lose colleagues who they know are struggling, will not be better off, and who they know have real issues and have been displaced. And that in itself, as we have established throughout this framework, they feel helpless, they feel guilty, they feel empathy for the person, and sometimes they feel the burden of what that person is going through, because they're humans and because they're also persons who understand what it means to struggle, what it means to come through the dry season. And they have survived. They no wonder why they were chosen and the least of the apostles, and they now begin to question themselves. So we have established that, and I want to now move into the 3 lessons for healing, survival, remorse. All right. The first thing I want you to understand is that you didn't survive by chance. You survived by a calling. It was your calling. And also know that I am a Christian leadership empowerment coach. And so the paradigm on which I operate is that nothing just happens. Everything in your life is ordered by God. And sometimes, even when you default, all things work together for the good of those who love and are called by his purpose. And so before you were born, he knew you and he established your purpose. And sometimes we put our purpose in dormancy. Sometimes it is derailed. But when we get back, because we ask God to give us the wisdom, and these things give us a wake-up call, so it propels us back onto the divine life script and where we are to go, and we find ourselves reflecting long enough, becoming self-aware, that we press into our purpose, because we are now able and we are at a place where we can actually listen and we actually want to hear. And there is this pulling on us in our minds, in our hearts, that is really the universe pulling us back into alignment. And so there are routes that different persons take to get back into this purpose reality and into this rhythm and alignment that we know cannot be discussed at this level. So we want to look at the fact that you didn't just survive by chance, you survived by calling. And we also want to honor the ones who didn't make it, but we don't want to be stuck there. And as I said, it's just lessons for healing, remorse, that I find works. And then there is a shift from guilt to grace, where you now understand that you are in fact blessed regardless of the situation, and you must become a blessing. That's it. So we don't want to be wrestling with the why me. We don't want to be wrestling there, because we want to understand that the next question would have to be why or what now. All right. So you didn't survive that storm, that layoff, round of layoff, that job loss. You didn't survive the shift in the ministry. You didn't survive that pivot. You didn't come through that uncertainty by chance. It's not a coincidence. You were preserved for a purpose. We want you to focus on that. We want to see you're still being here as something that should propel you into your God-given purpose and your calling. And so you want to use what would have broken you, because you're looking around and you look around and you see that you have survived and some have not. You want that to become the classroom that is now building you. So you want to look at the resilience, what you have carried out of that experience, and why you carried that out, and how that can now frame and build back your confidence, your trust, because of the clarity that you have gained from this experience, instead of thinking that it should not have been you. And sometimes we want to be clear about it. Leaders are human beings, and sometimes there is a example. Let us give an example of a house fire. You're the leader, you're in the home, and your family members die. Your son die, your wife die, your mother dies, and you are left behind. And you question why. What could you have done to prevent that? And so on. Why you? Why you? Why couldn't everybody come out of that house alive? You're in your family and you are going out, you're in a car accident and you survive, and all 5 members of your family have died. So many times that happens. I want us to understand what I mean, because life is real and these things happen to real people. And so this is for the real people that understand what it means and have had that experience, and those who are not understanding why some persons are not able, keep blaming themselves and keep carrying this guilt that we as coaches and psychiatrists and therapists have to be pulling them through. Some persons walk out a little easier and at a much better pace than others, and we must be patient with all. And so we have to make them understand and use what is breaking them or has broken them to become the classroom. We call that their story. We call that their wake up experience. We call it the wilderness season. We call it all sorts of things. And we have to pull that. When we are coaching persons, we pull them into the place where they begin to evaluate that point, that breaking point, that challenge, that obstacle, that hurdle, and carry them into a better place where they can now begin to go into the inner alignment and begin to frame and come up with this strategy that will carry them over, so that they can now fully pivot, press into their purpose, and have the story as a gem of where they are coming from, and giving other people hope. And God says it in John 15, verse 16, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. So your calling makes you fruitful, very fruitful. We want to understand that. And so instead of asking, that's where we want to go. I see you. Yes, Joy, thank you for joining, and Carla. Yes, I see you there. I'm paying attention to too. So instead of asking, why did I make it? Begin asking, what am I meant to make from this? Because transformation really starts when gratitude becomes assignment. When we turn our fear, very much so, thank you, Dr. Leslie, to faith, it's coming up in this. And when we turn our guilt, we appreciate the grace that has been given to us. Then we want to look at the next lesson. Honor the ones who didn't make it, but don't stay stuck there. And I say there is this tension, which is a holy tension between honoring others and holding ourselves back. And we have to be very guarded about that. So we can grieve who or what didn't make it, but we can't remain there. We can't remain there. We must understand that life goes on. We have to move forward. What I say, however, is that we must allow people to move forward at their own pace, and they will not move forward before they are actually ready. What coaches, therapists, counselors, psychiatrists, and friends and family do is that they support them so the recovery becomes much easier and much smoother. All right? So I am with you, Dr. Leslie. I have come to believe, I have proven that there are no coincidences as we surrender our true purpose. And I could give many stories of times when I have become impatient, when I have wanted the decision to be something different or to move in a different direction. And when I got to the point, because nothing would budge before God's hand was ready and so on. When I got to that point, I saw why. And if we could only see, and we want to understand that. So we are human beings, and we are going to feel hurt. We are going to feel sadness and grief for those persons. They are our friends. They are our family members. We love them. We care about them. We feel with them. We understand. We want them to know that they are not alone. So in that process, our human form will grieve with them. And sometimes too, based on the situation, we really can feel guilty that we are not able to do more for them because we really can't, or we would have preferred if things had gone differently. And so we want to understand that we in moving forward, it doesn't mean that we can't grieve or feel guilty, because some persons are able to do that. I want to think there's a minute set of persons whose hearts have become hardened enough so that they can, it's a survival for them. So they once they are surviving, that's just it. They move on very, very fast. And there are some who struggle with their humanity, with their core values, also with the fact that they are compassionate and kind and loving. And so they feel for that person. But you can grieve who or what didn't make it without feeling guilty. The gratitude in itself can be transformed, that you are not feeling guilty, but you see it as one of the equipping, or as a build up for you to do what God is saying here. He did a new thing for you, and it's for your building up, for you to be fruitful. And Moses never entered the promised land, but Joshua did. And so Joshua, while Moses was his mentor and everything, never saw himself taking over in that way. But Moses he had to take over, and he still had to lead, and he still had to finish the purpose that was given to him. Ruth lost her husband, and she had to carry her mother-in-law. She chose to carry her mother-in-law into her future as she walked into her future, because life sometimes is made up like that. Sometimes we can't carry those who have lost or who have been left behind, and there are some times when we can carry persons with us. What I want to say is that faith honors the past without letting it chain you to the present. So we must understand where we're coming from. We must have that comparison, but the comparison must make us more fruitful, and it must make us more focused and intentional, and it must make us more purposeful, because it would have given us enough clarity and would have prepared us enough for where we are going. Thank you so much for this point, Sean. The grief and guilt are part of the journey, very much so. The thing I've learned, that you have to feel it and let it be a signal to explore your inner world more, very much so. We looked at that last week. Owning it, your emotions, let it your emotions wash over you, be natural about it and so on, and see it for what it is, and actually look at the steps that you can take to overcome and to move forward confidently and authentically. Because sometimes, as I say, when we internalize it, when we touch the surface, when we remove the cobwebs and not kill the spider, we find that we begin to lead from the inside. So we carry baggages with us, and we become overly sensitive when people say certain things, and we are not able to genuinely trust people and so on when we carry the baggage. But when we confront it and see it for what it is and take the measures to overcome that works for us, because not every single measure works for every single person, then we want to understand that. So we want to ask important questions, and we looked at it last week. What am I feeling grief or guilt about? That's it. And what is the feeling trying to teach me? Exactly. And as I said last week, we must be prepared for the answers too, because sometimes we ask those questions, but we don't like the answers we receive, and we are not ready. So I want us to write down one way you can honor the legacy of those who impacted you if you are actually in leader of the remorse. Because sometimes we lose members also. We lose staff members, they move on to higher, and that in itself, they may feel guilty because they are moving on, they're leaving the organization at a time when they would have maybe been most needed. They had to make a hard choice as to actually a choice for themselves, choosing themselves and their family. It can be because of a relocation. They know that the institution would need them. And so when they move along, they have that remorse. And so it comes in the different ways that I have described and I'm still describing. All right. So we want to look at how we can honor those who impacted you, the step that you can take forward in faith this particular week in your organization if you have those circumstances and those decisions. And a lot of persons in Jamaica, I'm appealing to them, leaders have to make this week, have a lot, they can suffer from decision fatigue this week because there are so many decisions, so many things, so many persons that need them at this time as leaders that they are expected to support and are expected to actually make sure that their psychological well-being and health, overall health, is intact with limited resources, and also with their mental anxiety and distress themselves. And so we want to look at those who have lost also members of staff through these displacements, through death, through illness, and through the fact that they may have gotten nervous breakdown, they may have anxiety attack, and they can't come back to work. They have to be grappling with all of those things. We want to make sure that we do the things that will honor people and also their legacy if they find themselves incapable of navigating the loss that they're experiencing at this time. They're experiencing the guilt that they're feeling, because a lot of persons will come back into the mainstream of working with those types of guilt because their neighbors have been so badly affected, their family members are so badly affected, and so on. We want to know that remembrance becomes healing when it leads to action. Remembrance becomes healing when it leads to action. So we must take positive actions. So as we own and process our emotions and not deny it and not become distracted by pride or by the voices of persons who are telling us how we are supposed to be doing now, the expectations that are pushed on leaders, the fact that they should be having it all together, the fact that they must have so many answers, the fact that they must become support, the fact that they must be always standing so that persons can be there. They can be there for persons, can be a challenge right now, and persons can feel guilty and persons can feel helpless because they are not able to do what they are expected to be doing because they are human beings. So that guilt is really good enough to be the one, or I don't want to be the one either, Dr. Leslie, which comes from the fear of judgment and criticism, very much so. So it is not only that I'm not good enough to be the one, but there are some persons who say, I don't want to be the one. And we have to look at that side of it too, because some persons are saying, I don't want to be the one. I don't want to be the one. So the next one is shifting from guilt to grace, and you're blessed to be a blessing. That is the third lesson that I want to put out there. And so the survival remorse always whispers, you don't deserve, or I'm not good enough to be the one. Very good, Dr. Leslie. That's coming up. And it can also say, I don't want to be the one. That's the thing. That's the thing. But hear what grace says to you and what blessing says to you. I prepared you to be that one, and you are trusted with this. I trust you with this. That's what grace says. That's what God says. I trust you with this. That's why purpose is so different from role and responsibility. Because our journey, thank you, linking user, whoever you are, is not only for us, it's to empower others. And I want that to ring. Every leader who survives something hard has an opportunity. What's the opportunity? To model resilience, to mentor others, to multiply hope, to help persons to become masters of their own destiny. That's it. That's why you survived. To serve others, not to serve yourself. And that's why your story becomes so important. Your story must empower others. And there are parts of, when you're telling your story, you must understand who must hear your story and what part of it they're to hear at a particular time, because it's not all parts of that story that will benefit everyone. You have to be wise when you're multiplying hope, and you don't apologize for being favored at this point. What you are expected to do is to steward it very faithfully. So you survive for a reason. You are here, steward it faithfully. To whom much is given, much is required. So what am I saying? What's the practical wisdom I want to leave here? Turn your remorse into reach, serve, teach, encourage. Use your story as evidence that God still redeems, that he hears, that he sees, that he understands. Your survival is not to be selfish. It is a sacred stewardship. I hear you, Alison, and I believe that too. Somebody sent something to me on LinkedIn. It's not somebody that I know very well. And the person said that I made a particular decision because I sat in a room with Dr. Paul and she made a statement. And that day when she made the statement, I know she didn't know that it would impact me a year after. Of course, I was very humbled, but you're right. We may not always realize the impact we can make. It takes God's divine strength and our willingness and obedience, of course. And I want to post that because that's very important. Very important. And sometimes when we are going through when we are not the ones that are laid off, when we remain, there are some persons who really and get upset and they avoid us, and we are not really the ones at fault. That also is something that we must understand. And we must also steward that position faithfully. You know what I want to say too? We are in positions of persons who have mentored us or who have been good colleagues to us and who have valued us, our expertise, and we take over from them. We must guard their reputations. We must value and we must honor the strides that they made and what you're receiving because of those efforts and because of their expertise and because of their knowledge. And you must honor that position for that reason. So that makes it, I want us to understand how sacred the stewardship is, especially if we are faith-based. So here is what I want us to remember The takeaways: you're not carrying guilt, you're carrying grace. You're not just a survivor, you're a sign that God still restores. And you didn't just make it out, you were meant to make it out. Your survival was never the end of your story. In fact, it is the beginning of someone else's hope. And I want us to understand that. And I want us to work with that. And so before we wrap up, I want to speak to the heart of someone who has been watching and who has been carrying survivor's remorse. You have been blessed, really blessed, but you are really afraid to celebrate. You have been healed, but you still feel guilty for it. You made it through, whatever it is. You didn't even know you would survive it, but you still whisper, why me? I am saying to you, walk with the grace that covers you. Stop shrinking back. Don't shrink back. Don't apologize for being chosen. Lead with the gratitude that you have, not guilt. And live from healing, not from hurry. Very important. So I want to say, if today's presentation resonated with you, I go even deeper into healing, purpose, and faith renewal in my new book, My Faith Looks Up. So you can grab your copy or share it with a friend who's walking through their own season of respiration, who needs their faith upgraded, confidence at this time. And if you're a woman leader ready to rebuild from burnout and rediscover purpose, join me inside the Purpose Reborn program. This is where faith meets clarity and survival turns into strength. So we meet you at your needs with your personalized program, and we take you from where you are to where you ought to be by your desire. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook for more live conversations and Substack. I am being reborn over there. So you get these live conversations every Tuesday. And I also want you to share this replay with someone who needs to be reminded today that they didn't just survive, they were sent. They didn't just survive, they were sent. And so I want also you to remember that you are to shine, even when others are still finding their way, because your light might be the map they need. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. Philippians 1 verse 6. Carry that message with you as you move forward. And if you want to, as I said before, find clarity and purpose and renewed faith in every season, you grab a copy of your book, you join the program, and you can also subscribe to my newsletter. All right? Thanks for showing up. Remember, you are grace in motion, purpose in progress, and you're not just a leader, you're a vessel, and your soul matters. God is not calling you to lead on fumes, He's calling you to lead from overflow. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Until next week, when we dig or touch the surface of another session. Of course, on these short seasons, we are not able to give everything. But if you really want to continue the conversation, feel that you would want an accountability partner, you would want your upgrading faith, you want to discover your purpose, or if you want a motivational speaker or someone to help you to complete your master's or doctoral dissertation, you can always connect with me. I'm available. Thank you, every person, for taking the time, and God bless you. Have a great rest of your week.